everyone. My name is Christina, and I'm on the Vancouver Startup Week team. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are grateful to be virtually gathered on Indigenous land, regardless of where you are joining us from. I am grateful to be on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. I am privileged to live, work, and play on these lands. First, I'd like to thank you for joining us for VSW 2021 and welcome to How to Generate 560% Return on Your Investment. And we'll do it again with automation hosted by Wrk Technologies. This session is part of the VSW Growth Track and is proudly sponsored by Innovate BC. Innovate BC is a Crown agency that provides small businesses around the province with funding, business coaching, and educational content. They're helping entrepreneurs and founders start and scale their businesses and adapt to the changes brought on by COVID-19. If you're looking for support for your business, make sure you stop by their booth and learn more about how they can help. I also want to thank Wrk Technologies for being an event partner and also a sponsor. VSW could not happen without the continuous support from our community sponsors. If you have any questions for our sponsors and speakers, please post them in the Q&A in the Whova session. You can also upvote questions, and I will now pass the mic over to Mohannad with Wrk Technologies, and we will begin the session.
Very good. Thank you very much, Katty. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for those of you who are in Vancouver. I look forward to presenting to you guys a little bit of information about myself, my last company that I grew and scaled in the tech ecosystem, and then presenting to you guys as well what we're doing with the Wrk company, Wrk Technologies, and the automation industry overall. I'll be sharing a few slides with you guys today. I have my window open as well with the live chat, so if you guys want to ask any questions, feel free to do so, and I'll try as much as possible to feed them straight into the conversation. So let's get started. Today's conversation is really going to be about me just telling you guys more of a story. And the story really begins with how I started SweetIQ in 2010. Really, over the course of the last several years, I've been involved in the tech ecosystem. I've seen a dramatic change over how businesses in the tech industry have been evolving. For me, I was fortunate enough in 2010 to start a company that was in a nascent industry. Over the course of 4 years of commercialization of the business, we were able to grow the company to a $10 million run rate and eventually sold the company in 2017 to Gannett, for which our investors, John Stokes at Real Ventures, won the Canadian Venture Capital of the Deal of the Year award for the largest return at the time to investors in 2018, a 562% return to our investors. Over the course of developing SweetIQ over these 7 years, we learned a lot. And some of these lessons we're now reapplying. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you today is a little bit of the background around SweetIQ, some of these lessons that we learned, and then how we're reapplying them again today into the automation industry and why the automation industry in itself is important. And also more importantly, how it could potentially apply to you as part of your journey, whether you're looking for a position in a tech company or whether you're trying to build a company in the tech space or in the automation industry overall, or if you're even looking for to join a company that's in this industry. So hopefully you find this insightful. So our story really begins, or really my story begins back in 2010. I was much younger back then, but I got together with two of my co-founders, Rav and Mike, and it was our intention to try and understand and trying to find an opportunity in an industry and an ecosystem that was growing and evolving. Whenever you're trying to develop a solution set, it's important that you try and find something that has growth potential. And so for us, it was starting to learn about what was going on in digital marketing. At the time in early 2010, you may recall that phones were starting to become, phones were starting to become a little bit more addictive, right? Everyone started relying on Google Maps and Yelp and Facebook to make decisions about where to go buy products and services they needed. And, you know, everyone stopped sort of remembering directions or phone numbers to things. And so we learned by just analyzing our surrounding and even how we were using these products that there must be a need for businesses to be found across all of these different mapping software, whether it was Google Maps or Yelp or Facebook. And so as we started to analyze how the ecosystem was being driven, it became clear that the process to get yourself listed on mapping platforms like Google My Business or Yelp seemed pretty straightforward. It was like a form that you had to fill, but it actually involved a lot of different steps. And so we started becoming curious about, if you're a mom and pop shop or 1 or 2 locations, it might be easy for you to do. But what if you're a McDonald's that has 14,000 locations? What if you're Starbucks that has 30,000 locations? How do they go about managing that data at scale? And so as we started digging deeper into it more and more, it became very clear to us that there was an opportunity to build a product in the digital marketing space to help these large organizations manage their properties online, manage the sheer vast amount of information that needed to be disseminated all across the web. And it became even clearer to us that because these platforms, Google Maps and Yelp and so forth, were really trying to be customer focused, i.e. the end user, that there was going to be a lot of misinformation that also needed to be cleaned up. So there was something there for us to go and play around with. When it really boiled down, though, what became the most important part of this entire business was, even though everyone was trying to sell this marketing jargon around digital local marketing and so forth, the single point of truth in this entire business was about the pins. How do we help customers who are looking for specific products and services in their local geographies or find these service providers, and how do we connect them together? And so for us, it was a series of steps that we went to go through, and this is what I'm going to be sharing with you, which is sort of the beginning of the playbook of how we built and sold SweetIQ and how we're reapplying this to the automation industry today. And so our first step was to decide, well, if we're going to go and spend the next 5 to 7, potentially 10 years of our lives building this business, it needed to be in an industry that really mattered, an industry that really is as big as we think that it is. And so as we started researching, it became clear that businesses spent at the time an outrageous amount of money on marketing and advertising. In fact, in 2017, $457 billion were spent on digital marketing and digital advertising. That's an obscene amount of money. And so given that so much money was being spent, one could only assume that a percentage of it was going to start getting diverted to what was at the time called local search and local marketing. And so for us, that checked the first box, that this was a market that really deserved time and attention because it had value that we can go and retrieve from clients. Step number 2 was, okay, there's a lot of money being spent in this industry. Is it being spent specifically on this problem? And so we, again, through research and through spending time with peers and clients and prospects and stuff like that, we asked the questions that mattered. And so what we learned was major brands were managing their data in Google Sheets, which was unbelievable to us, but these were realities of our world. Businesses were also absolutely petrified from local search in general. They were really worried that when a client looks for a cell phone store in Montreal or a business in Toronto or a coffee shop in Vancouver, that if their businesses were not found in these local searches, that these potential clients would go to the competition. So that fear of missing out was something that was very real for them. And 3, it's always good when you have a comparable to be able to show that this industry is working. And so for us, we had a competitor called Yext, who at the time when we had started 3 years prior to us. And in those 3 years, they were already at a $10 million run rate. And so for us, if you start putting the pieces together, you start understanding, well, if this is a market where there is $500 billion being spent on digital marketing in general, and there's already a player that was able to get to $10 million run rate that quickly, and there was no clear number 2 or number 3 in the space, that a big market like this has enough room for more than one player. And so that was sort of an indicator for us that this was worth the time and effort to go and spend time in it. And so we took all of this and put our heads together, which for me, step 3 was all around building a differentiated product. Now, we understand what the problem set is. People or businesses need to be found on these mapping softwares, and they are afraid of missing out on potential clients. And we have another player in the industry who's performing really well, who's selling listings at scale. So how could we differentiate our product? And so for us, it was really something that was deeply rooted into a thesis that we have, in that no matter what it is, whether it's a big brand, a small brand, businesses in general are just made up of people. And people generally like to buy stories, not necessarily products. And the best comparable that I can give you is, think about the story that Apple sells versus the story that Microsoft sells. Everyone is enamored and excited about owning an Apple product. And you might argue that that's the same for Microsoft, but that's not really quite true. And you believe that to be true. And so what we decided to do is to take a very similar approach. How can we take something as boring as a pin on a map and turn it into a story that businesses would understand? And so we developed the entire SweetIQ model around the storytelling side of things. So we took an approach of, instead of me going into a prospect and saying, well, I'm here to help you get listed on Google and Yelp and Facebook, instead we took an approach of, I'm here to tell you a story on how we are going to be able to drive incentivized foot traffic to your store. How do we bring shoppers who are looking for a product or service that you may be carrying internally within your store? How do we bring them to your store, and how do we help you measure that conversion? And that really just changes the perspective of the conversation from, I'm here to buy listings, to I'm here to help for you to help me actually drive more revenue for each one of my stores. And so once we've decided on the manifestation of the story and how we're going to tell it, then it became really important that the story gets told really well, that the story is tight, that when they have clear objections, that we know how to handle them. All right, well, so if you get me listed on Google and Yelp, why do I have to keep paying for this product every month? Why is there going to be potentially some reviews that I have to deal with? How often does my information need to change? How do I optimize my content? So over time, and these are just early pain points that every business is going to go through, you're going to see that clients are going to tell you the things that they want to hear. And sometimes they're just going to ask you very difficult questions. Take all of this and don't make it a silo. Don't make it that it just sits with a sales rep. Make sure that you have a process internally where that information gets disseminated across the entire company so that you end up developing that really tight story that resonates with everyone. Also, it's very important that you evolve that story over time. All right, you're selling pins today on a Google Map software, but tomorrow, what's going to be the next frontier of search? And as you'll see in the next few slides, for us, it was voice, right? It became voice assistants, it became AI, it became all of these other things that location-based platforms were starting to develop. So as these technologies emerge, you have to be able to optimize and elevate your story to fit the industry's evolution. Then it also becomes really important to back up these stories with real life examples. All right, so if people are sitting in a room across from you and they are the representatives of McDonald's or of Bell Canada, and you can give them a real example about how, let me do a search for you right now and look for a store in Victoria or in Montreal or in Toronto, and show them that a store is not popping up or that the information coming up is wrong, then they're able to really get a very clear, granular insight about the problem set itself. And all the much more. And I remember examples where we would go in and the VP of a company who shall remain unnamed didn't believe us, and we would do the search for them right in front of them and show them how their information wasn't coming up or that they had very negative reviews that were being unaddressed. And then immediately they would buy the product right away, because right there and then it became very real to them. And finally, once you've sort of done all of these things, then it becomes important that that story gets indoctrinated across your entire company. Not just your sales reps, but also your customer success, your executives, the rest of the team. Everyone needs to be able to speak that same language. You're developing a language internally that is being used not just to sell and promote your product, but also in terms of thinking about the expansion of the business. Remember, you're trying to be a business advisor to these clients, not just yet another, tech software that they can turn on or off. And once everybody in the company, in your company, can speak that language, then it becomes just really easy for you to evolve roles of people, to piggyback off of marketing and sales for other types of collateral and so on. And so with all of these learnings, what we ended up doing is we, like I said, developed the story. So if you'll remember, we were selling pins, but look at this beautiful story that now we were able to tell. We're talking about the customer journey. The journey of an individual who is going from search, I want to find a product, to discovery, where could I potentially get them, to intent localization, I actually want this product here, to decision making, this is the store that I can get it from, to conversion, I've actually gone into the store and bought. So a pin converts into a story that is this well proposed, well dictated, well received, and that anyone can connect to, because every single one of our prospects that we were walking into was having that same experience themselves. Also, one thing that's a personal pet peeve of mine that happens often in the tech industry is we don't take the time to make things visually appealing. Why is that? Why do things need to look like Windows 95 when they can look like a beautiful design that actually talks to the people? So invest early in having good looking designs. People are very visual. They appreciate you taking the time to put a presentation in front of them that isn't just a bunch of text on a white slide. Take the time to design these things. It's not going to cost you a lot of time or effort, but I promise you it makes a world of difference. And then, like I said, connect these conversations with them. So we went from telling them the entire journey of a customer to now connecting it. Here's the real example. I'm going in to pitch a restaurant now. Let me search for a restaurant that's open right now. How come you're not listed in here? And let's have this conversation. This isn't about you telling them that they're doing something wrong. This is about you telling them this is the reality of your world, whether you know it or not. And so let's now have a real conversation about this problem set and let's solve it together. Here's how I can solve it for you. Here's my cost. Does this make sense for you or not? And if it does, great. Let's build that journey together. And remember earlier, I was talking about the evolution of the industry. We spoke about the journey of the customer. We spoke about how I can show them a real tangible example. What this example we would show them was, this was a video that Google had put together showing how you can actually, and you're welcome to try it, you can go to your Google Now device and ask Google to say, I'm looking to book a haircut right now. And they'll actually, Google's assistant will search for every single hairdresser and start calling them using an AI that mimics a human voice to try and find an appointment that's available in the next 24 hours whenever you need them. So again, connecting the dots with them that this is a problem set that's already big today. Imagine at how much bigger it'll become as these voice search assistants become more and more prolific and implemented everywhere within our ecosystem. And as you guys now know, voice search is available not only in our homes, but it's also available in our cars and everywhere basically where we go. So think about the future. It is your job to educate the client about the things that they don't know, and doing it in a way that is very, not just informative, but frankly, just honest and complete about the future. And don't talk down to them. Talk to them in an educational manner so that they can perceive you in a way that is positive and not one where you're telling them that, frankly, they suck. And so the last piece for us was also to take into consideration that this fear of missing out is still an important driver. You have to decide for yourself whether your organization wants to sell on fear, uncertainty, and doubt, what we call FUD, or on promoting the values of the business. Sometimes it's going to be a mix of both. It depends on who you're talking to. The point of all of this is you need to be prepared. You're going to go into every single meeting thinking, okay, well, I've got a process that I'm going to sell through. It's A to Z. This is what it's going to look like. You're going to be thrown a curveball. We had these sales decks that had a lot more content that we would present, just so that in case we were challenged about something, we would have the supporting material. And so if a client was saying, no, this is, our clients are finding us, no problem. We can show them the slide where we're actually not finding them. Oh, what is like the percentage of people that won't find us? It's actually 37%, sir. Are you willing to miss out on 37% of potential business? So being ready and being prepared, and again, putting things in a very highly visual way are things that people are going to remember. And more importantly, when you're done presenting this, you're obviously going to send them that deck. Now they can share it internally and it can start a conversation. And please take the time to make sure that everything is referenced from reputable sources. Don't come up with your own stats. People do this all the time. There's probably a stat about every single thing that you want. So take the time to research it. And once it's there, you'll really be able to re-leverage it all over. Now, we've talked about how we've created the story, how we've manifested it into a conversation. The next part of it is, as you're starting to really scale your company and your business, you've got to figure out how to find the shortcuts. As a young company that was based out of Montreal, at the time we were 6 or 7 people, going and knocking on the door of a McDonald's or an In-N-Out Burger was an absolute no way. Like they just weren't going to open the door. So we had to find a shortcut. And for us, even though we had this really good story, the way in was not what we thought it was going to be. But we knew that at the end of the day, we needed to find a way to get into these conversations, because every single time we went to a McDonald's or In-N-Out or whatever, they just didn't give us the time of day. So for us, our shortcut was channel partners. We found channel partners to be incredible door openers. We would go to these marketing agencies that were the agencies of record to some of these organizations, and then us convincing those marketing agencies that their clients could benefit from our solution and that they could also financially benefit from that. So in the early days of establishing a product and trying to prove product market fit, you've got to incentivize people to do the selling for you. Sure, you're going to have your own sales reps. Sure that they're going to be, doing the job and the cold calling and the prospecting. But the instant that you can have a shortcut, just so that you can have a few of these logos, it makes a huge difference. Because I promise you, the instant that you put on your sales deck that you've got logos that look like this, that in itself gets you credibility and allows you to sell your product a lot, well, much more easily. Then once all of this is done, you're going to want to start expanding your sales. And the expansion of the sales is something that you're going to be spending quite a bit of time on. Remember that you're really trying to sell a story that aims to be different from everybody else in the industry. But the problem is, other than doing the cold calling, other than going through prospects, other than buying leads and all of these things, or perhaps you're doing paid advertising, the other channel as well where you're going to want to promote yourself and promote your brand is going to be at events, or in some capacity where your brand is going to be public. But the reality is, at least in the B2B world, in the B2C world, it's a little bit different, but in the B2B world, everybody looks and acts and talks exactly the same way. This is a picture from a trade show that we did at the NRF, the National Retail Federation show in New York City. This was hosted at the Javits Center, and I think it had something like 1,700 or 2,000 booths, if I'm not mistaken. So as you can appreciate, 30 or 40,000 people walking across thousands of booths, it's very, very difficult to try and see the difference between them. And so we decided to take an approach where we were just going to be different. In that specific case, we actually set up a banana stand where we were giving out frozen chocolate covered bananas and talking to people. At other events, we hired two professional masseuses to give people 10-minute back rubs while they were standing in line. Because guess what? People walk all day long at a trade show and they want to be able to just take a minute of a break. And that was a huge selling part for us, because as people were waiting in line to get a massage, we were just talking to them and selling them our product and solution. We've done everything from having private dinners and private events. We've done co-booths with Microsoft and Retail Next and the RCC. The whole point out of all of this is you've got to be different, guys. You've got to be able to figure out a way of distinguishing yourself from others. Not just, and I give the booth as just one example, but I'm also talking about your webpage. Why, almost every single tech company more or less looks the same online. How are you going to differentiate? How are you going to tell me something that's going to intrigue me enough to make me want to give you the time of day to consider your solution? So embrace the weird, embrace the different. Once you've done all of that, and now your sales are starting to trickle in and your various parts of your business are starting to hum, convert traction into processes. I know it says here sales processes, but really it's every single part of your department. Manage your CRM and your various internal systems religiously. Make sure that you don't neglect them. Make sure that they don't end up becoming a dumping ground. Have recurring meetings, have pipeline reviews, have these conflict management meetings and so on. And once you've had all of this information, now you need to start operating at a different altitude. In the first few years of your business, you're going to be operating at street level. You're in the weeds every day. You're managing every little part of the business. Little by little, you're going to need to elevate yourself and let the systems that you've put into place manage themselves. The other important part of that business, of that process rather, is just the notion of being able to have visibility about what's going on. You're going to need to dashboard absolutely everything. I'm not talking just about reps and CS agents, but I'm talking about even just the lead flow coming in, the amount of listings for us we were building, how many errors we were having, how many invoices we sent out. Having that information allows you to make decisions that are really meaningful for your business. And the last thing that you want when you're in the growth stage of your business is having uninformed decisions, or decisions that are based out of emotion and not based on empirical evidence. The best thing that you can do for yourself is having data specifically for sales and customer success, so that the conversation can be binary. We either hit this number or we did not. It's not an emotion of, I think that we did a good job. It needs to be more than that. And then finally, you start really taking all of this data and then incentivizing for the right type of behavior across your entire company. This is an example that I'm just giving on the sales side, but you can incentivize everybody from executive all the way down to your lowest paid position, if you will. How do you think about their metrics? Move away from the notion of just having fixed income. We're entering now the day and age where having a base salary and a variable part to your salary is totally normal. So implement this early so that these individuals can recognize, oh, I can make a lot more if I perform better. And now I understand where the metrics that I need to hit are, and I have a dashboard that helps me track them. It just makes the conversation a lot more honest. One of the things that we're doing at Wrk today is we're actually trying to transition completely how we compensate eventually our employees, but even just right now, our platform and how we deliver work on the notion of the deliverability of a unit of work versus on the amount of time being used. Because if you think about where we're at today in terms of how we compensate for work being done, it's an hour of your time. So what makes it that the hour that I have spent today as the CEO giving this talk is worth more than the hour that one of my customer success reps just spent potentially saving a client that's going to spend a few $100,000 with us this year. There's an unfair equation that's happening in the ecosystem right now that's valuing value of delivery based on time. And we are trying to change that at Wrk to change it to a value based on delivery. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. And then with all of these things now coming together, you're now starting to enter the scale. You've dashboard everything. You see the metrics. You've incentivized for the type of behavior. Now is the time to think about hiring people to start operating at the altitude that you can no longer operate at. Remember, when you're working in the business, slowly you're going to need to remove yourself so that you can operate on or work on the business. So that means you're going to need to hire more doers. In the early days, it's really important that you don't get confused and start hiring the wrong type of position too early. I see this all the time happening in startups where they have a CRO and a CTO and a CMO and every kind of C-level at the seed stage. The reality is if you've already hired those C-level positions that early, you're probably going to outgrow them by the time that you're in your A or your B round. And so my advice to you is, unless if you really have a superstar or perhaps a co-founder who has that title, at your seed stage, you shouldn't have anything more than directors, maybe a couple of senior directors if necessary. Moving up to Series A, senior directors and VPs, Series B, senior VPs and C levels. And make sure that those people that you're hiring, because again, I see this all the time, some of these C levels and VP levels are, they've done it before and that's great, but they're no longer willing to roll up their sleeves, which then becomes really challenging when you're asking them to manage a team where the team no longer believes or doesn't believe that person coming in is going to be able to outperform them. So having a VP of customer success who isn't willing to pick up the phone and deal with a client complaint because they think they're too good for it, or a CRO who isn't willing to go and close deals themselves, they're never going to gain the respect, in my opinion at least, of the people that are going to be reporting into them. So make sure that those V levels and C levels are doers, not just thinkers that just want to put together high-level plans and just watch it getting executed. And that same sort of strategy applies to hiring your entire team. For us, we went, as you can see from the progression on the left-hand side, from 3 to 25 people in the span of 4 years, and then 25 to 200 people in the span of 4 years. Having that growth is going to be really difficult to manage. And so hiring the right people at the right time is really important. Hire slow, fire fast, be very clear with your expectations. Make sure that everybody around the table understands what their roles are and what their responsibilities are. Make sure as well that those individuals are incentivized properly and that they're bought into the vision and the plan of what you're building. And again, that the people that you have hired, the V's and the C's and the D's that are above them, are the right types of people so that they can all stick around for a long time. And then the last couple of things that I'll talk about as we sort of wrap up the story of SweetIQ and how we got to our ending is, we really had this idea about how we could be a really big player in the local ecosystem, in the local marketing space. And we built a differentiated product and we were really focused on selling the solution in a differentiated manner. And we were very successful at doing that. Using the channel strategy allowed us to go and open up these really big brands and go and say, we've got In-N-Out Burger and Bell Canada as a client and so forth. And so that gave us more and more. But we got to a certain point where going from 1 million to 2 was easy, 2 to 4 was more difficult, 4 to 10 was compoundly or astronomically more difficult. And so in the same way that we found a shortcut to try and figure out how do we find a way into these big deals, we also needed to find a way of expanding faster. And so we were opportunistic. And the way that we did that is we kept our ears to the ground. I got a phone call from my director of sales at the time at like 11 p.m. my time saying, hey, listen, I heard that company X, Y, and Z, who was a competitor of ours in California, is not doing so well. I'm hearing rumors that they might be up for sale. Immediately within the next 48 hours, we had spoken to their investors. They were in fact trying to sell the company, and we were able to go in and pick up a distressed asset and buy all of their competitors for cents on the dollar. That took our MRR from the 600,000 into the $1 million plus in the span of a few months. And so anytime that you have an opportunity to take a big swing like this, go and take it. It'll accelerate your business. It'll endear you more and more to your investors, and it'll make everyone around the table be wary of the fact that you're willing to make these big, bold moves, because most of the time, big companies don't think that smaller companies do stuff like this. So take the chances. And then the final thing for me was just all around engineering your exit. So what does this mean? For me, the biggest lesson that I learned throughout this whole process is that companies are bought, they're not sold. What does this mean? It means that you can have the best company in the world, but if you're really excited about just wanting to sell the company and you go and hire an investment banker, it's a very impersonal thing. If you really want to be in a state, and for us, we knew SweetIQ was not for us something that we wanted to try and take public. It was a company that we wanted to grow to a certain scale and sell it so that we could have that traction behind our or under our belt. And so in the same way that we were selling a story to our clients and prospects, we were also trying to sell a story to companies that could acquire us. And so what we did over the course of several years is we just built relationships. We built relationships with partners. We built relationships with prospects that were in the space, but that could potentially be acquirers of us. And so my advice to you is, if there is a world in which you want to think about developing an exit for your company, start early, start building these relationships, find your internal champion. The reason that we were acquired was because the CEO of Reach Local and I actually became very good friends over a short period of time. We really believed in each other's visions. She believed that I could bring a lot of value to her company. I believed that they could be a really good home for us. And once the conversation became honest and that we think that we want to do something together, it stopped becoming about price and terms. Those things became secondary. And in fact, we ended up getting a term sheet, which is this one here in front of you, on January 13th. And we sold the company by April, which, if you ask anybody in the venture capital world or ecosystem, it's an extremely fast time frame. Usually it takes many months and potentially even over a year to sell a business. So be genuine, be real, but most importantly, engineer your own exit. Don't wait for it to happen. So a few things just overall to remember from my SweetIQ story. For us, and for me specifically, as you're going to embark on this journey of building the company, there's going to be times where it's going to be very difficult. And you know that you've probably already had some of these. And it's really easy to think that the grass is greener somewhere else, whether it's at a competitor, or maybe it's at a different company, or maybe you're seeing in the news that this company just raised umpteen millions of dollars and they shouldn't have. Don't just drown out all that noise. Put your blinders on, focus on the opportunity that's in front of you, and you decide how green you want your grass to be. And if it's not green enough, we'll make it greener. That's on you to do. The second thing is make these bold moves. Don't be beholden to whatever standard strategy you think that is reserved to the size of company that you're at. If you think that you can go and acquire a competitor, go to your investors and tell them, I need X millions of dollars to go and acquire them, and here's why. Make the case and state it, but make bold moves. One thing that became really important for me as well is hiring for diversity. And I know that this is one of those interesting topics that sort of became cool for people to talk about, because I think people just want to, be part of the story that's going on. But we've come to see that it actually makes a huge impact. For us, having people of diverse backgrounds and ethnics and religious and anything else that makes them diverse in their own way actually brings a new dynamic around the table that we wouldn't have seen. And I remember reading or being told rather about a story with Shopify, where in the early days of Shopify, everyone looked the same. Toby was hiring people that were just technocrats, people that were like him, other programmers. And after a while, it became very clear the only way that Shopify could evolve was if they started hiring someone who was very different. And that's when Harley joined the company, who couldn't be more different than Toby. And so hiring for diversity and difference, I think for me, is something that's very important. Don't be afraid to make big changes overall. Operate at the right altitude, like I mentioned, and really truly engineer your own exit and be truthful with yourself about that realistic utopia that you want. So this is it, guys. This is the story around SweetIQ and how we developed this playbook and how we were able to generate this very meaningful exit for our investors. And so we've now taken all of that information and distilled it into this playbook that we're recreating here at Wrk. And so you'll see a lot of the similar slides that I just showed you guys, but now in a new ecosystem, in automation. And I wanted to just start by putting up this picture of David and I, who are good friends, and David is my business partner at Wrk. And I get told often, don't work with friends, don't work with friends. But the reason that I put up this here is because one of the really important things as well at SweetIQ and at Wrk is it's very difficult to build a company. And so if you're going to build a company, at least choose to build it with someone whose company you enjoy. And not just a partner, but also with other people in the company. But if you are going to choose having a partner, make sure that it's a partner you're willing, and ironically, this is a picture of exactly that you're willing to go on a long road trip with. If you guys are going to be willing together to spend 8, 10, 20, 100 hours together in the same car or on planes or in hotels or whatever, make sure that that person, you're going to enjoy their company, because you will be spending a lot of time with them. So why automation? Why did David and I decide to get into this space? Because we saw firsthand the impact that it had for us at SweetIQ. And so this is a slide here that showcases over the 4 years that we were at SweetIQ until 2017, and then when we were acquired, the green lines denote sort of the growth in revenue, 1.5 to 3 to 10 to 20. And the gray chart here denotes the number of ops people that we had. As you can tell, we were sort of maybe doubling revenue, but almost 4xing the number of ops people that we needed to deliver our results. We got to a point in 2015 where, because we were growing and scaling so rapidly, we had a problem where we thought that we were going to need to hire well over 100 people in operations. And that's just because the nature of what we did required that some of the work that we did just had to be done manually. And so we needed to figure a way of automating ourselves. And so we did here between 2015 and 2017. And that allowed us to not only triple our ARR, but also reduce our headcount in ops by about 20%. And you can see here how we grew again 2x from 2017 to 2018, but only marginally adding to the people in the ops team. So we understood that there was a problem for us that we needed to solve, which was all around how do we scale the delivery of our work. And I have a background, my background is computer science. I have coded for a living for many years. And one of the biggest pet peeves that I have about the tech industry is that we have an ability to overcomplicate and oversimplify things. And it became clear to me as I started studying and analyzing this industry in the same way that we did at SweetIQ with listings, we're doing now for automation, that people throw these words around without truly understanding what they mean. iPaaS, RPA, unattended bots, all of these things. It's very, very difficult for you to understand what all of these things mean and and the value that they can bring to you. And so it became clear to us that the automation industry was nascent and it was growing. The reality is, and if some of you guys are running your own businesses today, you'll probably agree with me that a majority of the work that happens behind a desktop today can be automated using processes that already exist. Almost, in fact, 60% of the work that we do behind a computer screen. But the problem that we see today is that the solutions that exist in the market are either very limited in scope. They'll automate simple little parts. They'll connect your Jira to your HubSpot, to your calendar, like Zapier that you might have tried, or they're very complicated. You may have heard the term RPA with companies like UiPath and Blue Prism that can automate much bigger parts of your platform and your system, but are very complicated to deploy and are very, very expensive. i.e., you can start with Zapier for maybe a few $100s a month, and then the next leap up to that, which is RPA, is $150,000 plus a month. So we tried to really figure out, where could we fit in here? What is the problem set? The problem set is people want to be able to deliver their work at scale, but the solutions that exist there are either very limited in scope. Zapier only allows you to do basic stuff. For example, they can update a row in a Google spreadsheet or delete one, but they can't create charts, they can't create pivot tables. So that means it's very limited in what it can do. And then the next step up from that is RPA, which can do these things, but then do you want to go and spend $150,000 a year on deploying an RPA to do these basic steps? And so we knew that there was a gap and we wanted to go in and try and solve it. But if you'll remember what I said earlier, what we want to try and sell is a story, not just a product. And so developing the story set from the beginning became something really important. And so for us, the development of the story was, how can we reverse engineer automation? And it first for us became about, let's change the conversation from automation is about bots and AI and machine learning to automation is about the delivery of your work at scale. And if that's the case, well, then how do companies think about delivering work at scale? And so it became clear to us that what we needed to do was, let's go into companies and understand, what do they do? When you have someone who works in customer success, whether they're in healthcare, in education, in insurance, in financial services, whatever industry, are they all doing the same thing? Are they all just onboarding clients onto their platform, generating reports, doing manipulations of information in Excel, doing research on LinkedIn? And it so turns out that it is. No matter what business function you're in, you're almost always repeating the same types of steps. Now, they'll have nuances for sure, but in most cases, most people work in Excel today. And when they're working in Excel, they're probably transforming data. Most people go on Google or Yelp or LinkedIn or whatever platform they want to search for prospects on. They go on it on a daily basis and extract information and manipulate it. Most people today in organizations are going to operate in Salesforce and in LinkedIn and in HubSpot. We're aware of all of these tools. So instead of what the incumbents are doing in the industry, which is developing an automation engine and giving you the keys so that you can customize it for your needs, we decided to build a product and a storyline around, well, we're actually going to index what human beings do in their day-to-day job, and then create pre-developed, pre-configured units of work that we call Wrk Actions. And so for us, a Wrk Action is an individualized unit of work that delivers exactly what it says it'll do. I have a unit of work called the Wrk Action that will go on LinkedIn and find companies that match a specific profile. It'll generate a report on Airtable. It'll send a message to a colleague on Slack. It'll add a user to HubSpot. It'll go in Excel and remove duplicates. And behind the scenes in the background, every single one of these units of work will then be developed by or delivered by a human, a machine, an RPA, a bot, a third party. The reality is, this is what we learned. It doesn't matter. When we talk about automation, it would be great that it could be done by a machine, but it's not that important. The only thing that really matters to clients is that this unit of work gets done accurately, it gets done quickly, and it gets done for the same consistent price. And in fact, in our surveying of clients and of prospects, we asked the question, why aren't you deploying AI? Why aren't you deploying RPA or automation? And the overwhelming majority of the responses have been, we just don't trust the machines yet. And so given that there is still this layer of mistrust or lack of trust is a better term that exists still today, us bringing in a human piece to an automated equation allows us to change the conversation from, or remember earlier I said you need to be able to handle the objections from clients. We now know that this is an objection that we can handle. And so our story now is we have a platform that allows you to create a digital version of your workflow using pre-built, pre-configured units of work that we call Wrk Actions. And these Wrk Actions are delivered by both humans and machines together. If the machine fails, the human supervises it. If the human fails, the machine supervises it. Creating that symbiotic relationship between the two gives us an edge and an advantage in an industry that is way too beholden to how things used to be done. And we're trying to change that. And obviously trying to now expand the story. Remember, I talked about the evolution of the story over time. For us, it became clear too, as we were talking to clients, that the way that they manifest and the way that they think and visualize about their processes is in a flowchart format. So why make it complicated? Let's give users the same impact. Let's give them a flowchart that they can build with these Wrk Actions that replicate internal processes, but make it so simple and almost magical where when they press publish on our platform, it'll actually start delivering the work that they've described. And once again, you get into, remember, we're selling a story. You're telling them that their work is going to now be delivered by automation and that they can see it in real time. And then there are pieces that other platforms will not do because they can't have the human piece. It removes all of those objections right away. And so tying all of this in together as part of our playbook, trying to understand the industry and why it was going to be important for me and David to spend the next several years of our lives building this product is because the industry in itself is important and large and big and worthy of our time. So when we think about the $458 billion that were being spent in marketing automation, in marketing and advertising on the last few slides, I'm now talking to you about an industry that is worth $2 trillion in 2015, which is the amount of work that is going to be disrupted by automation, by technology, as being studied by McKinsey. And so as you can estimate out over the course of the next 15 years, you can see how that's going to be worth trillions and trillions more. And everybody that's trying to play in this space is playing in the small bucket of what we call business process outsourcing. In fact, RPA was only worth $11 billion out of an estimated $130 billion in the United States alone in 2020. So seeing that the size of the problem is so big, it gives us aspirations for building a really big business, especially once you've already had one before that you've done and that now you want to be able to go much, much bigger into the next one. And so the other piece too was thinking about how do we go to market in a manner that allows us to be differentiated, not just from the storyline, but also from how quickly we can be onboarded. One of the lessons that we learned at selling our product at SweetIQ is when you are trying to sell into big brands, the sales cycle is very long. And so we tried to change a few parts of our playbook right now to try and integrate these organizations a little bit earlier. And so we've done two things. Number one, we've reapplied our playbook of taking a shortcut. So in the first shortcut for SweetIQ was going through marketing agencies. Our shortcut for Wrk is going through the management consultants. These are management consulting firms that own relationships with clients who have been given the mandate to automate their work for them. So they already have the relationship and they already know what needs to be done. So going in through them saves us a lot of time. The second part is by going in early and trying to find what we call medium complex processes. And again, this is just part of our story that we're telling. Instead of going and saying, we can automate your entire world, we're going and saying, what's a process that you guys do that's sort of like repetitive and manual and your team hates doing that is important enough for your day-to-day operation of your business, but not important enough where you can dedicate dev cycles or that you can go and buy an off-the-market solution for. And almost always there's one, whether it's onboarding clients, whether it's streamlining document acquisition, whether it's doing competitive pricing research, whether it's doing document preparation for students, whether it's doing monitoring of accounts payable. Every single company in the world has a bunch of these internal medium complex processes that they hate doing, that they wish there was a solution for, but that are just custom enough where there isn't a good enough solution in the market that's available, or that they're willing to spend the money to developing an internal solution, or going to spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars on an RPA. And then finally, to try and really sort of nail the coffin and nail hit the nail in the coffin, if you will, was trying to understand how we can get them to see that this is a no-brainer. And for us, we took a page out of the Amazon Web Services playbook. If you'll remember back in the day, in order for you to go and get a web server or any server, you'd have to go and schlep one from the store or order online. It's a few $1,000s. You'd have to have your own data store. They converted our entire psyche to, no, you can actually rent a server space from me and you don't have to worry about it. And to lower the barrier to entry so that I'm not spending thousands of dollars to come in, what did they do? A server was $5, $4, $10, depending on how big it was per month, right? We're doing the same thing. Instead of coming to you and saying, you need to have an upfront cost to build your workflow and map it out, and then you need to commit $10,000 a month, which is sort of the minimum in a lot of clients in our industry, we decided to come in at a transactional cost, really reducing the barrier to entry. What's the worst that could happen? You're going to take a little bit of time to map out your process on our platform. You're going to see that the results are going to work. If they don't work, okay, no harm, no foul. If it does work, now I'm giving you a transactional cost. It costs you $6.15 every single time I deliver 1 unit of work for you. What's not to like about a model like that? And then when you get to a world where you see that you've got repeated volume that is growing over time, well, then we can have a conversation about volume discounts and monthly commitment fees and so forth. And so finally, the last thing that I want to leave you guys with is it's really important that at this stage of your business, depending on how far along you are with the development of your roadmap, that you still have aspirations for building something bigger. Even if your goal is to sell your business, still have a roadmap of something that you aspire to become so that the acquiring entity can see that this is more than just a one-trick pony. And so for us at Wrk, well, for us first at SweetIQ was to really own the conversation around the truth of your information. It started with your local listings, and then we eventually evolved into reputation, and then into social, and then it could have gone into a lot more things. For us now at Wrk, it's owning the supply of work so that we can become your ubiquitous helper in your business operation every day. Imagine you're opening up a Word document, you're working on an HR manual, and you would really like to have someone do a legal review of that content, or to have someone copyright this, or to have this be approved by your HR department. Right-click, go to Wrk, and delegate that task. That is the vision for our product and how we think about automation, which to us, automation is really just another way of saying, deliver my work at scale. And now we're just making it super simple and super seamless. And so this is a bunch of stuff that we can do today. We have tons of different capabilities, whether it's from data ingestion to marketing to customer success and so on. And so not that this is really a sales pitch for you guys, but if there is a world in which this could be helpful to you, we actually have a couple of perks here available. So for anyone attending the Vancouver Startup Week, if you just email us or send us a message on the Wova app, we'll give you $2,500 worth of free credit on our platform for you to test out any workflow. It could be anything, whether it's lead generation, whether it's document preparation, whether it's stuff in your finance team or your legal team. There's very little that we haven't seen. And with that, you'll be connected directly with one of our functional analysts who will actually work with you to map out these flows. And if you're on the other side of the equation where you're looking for a job or you're interested about what we're doing, we're hiring in basically every single department. We're venture backed by very, very strong VCs in Canada. We're growing very rapidly. We're adding, like I said, in every single department. So would love to hear from you guys. And overall, I just thank you all for your time. We're about 10 minutes. And so if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to take them. But other than that, I'm also, I'm more than happy to remain engaged. So if you'd like to have a chat, feel free to email me, mo@wrk.com. I hope that this was helpful. And if there's anything that I can do to help along your journey, feel free to reach out. Thank you all.
Hi, Mo, that was great. I loved your presentation. I was taking notes along the side because there's certain things that you said along the way where I'm like, you know what, that's what I've been trying to say all along, but you phrased it so well. For example, you're not telling the clients about a specific problem to make them feel bad, but you're telling them about the reality of their situation. And sometimes it's all about that education and communication. So I thought that was really well said.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think that we do ourselves sometimes a little bit of a disservice in that we don't talk about these things publicly enough. And again, I think there's this inherent connotation in the tech ecosystem that that things have to be done a certain way. And I think that sort of like the Twilios of the world that promote the idea of talk to your developer, but that's a product that was developed for developers. I think there's a more human way of just having a conversation. And that's really the message that I'm trying to deliver here, which is let's keep the jargon to ourselves amongst the techies, but to the rest of the world, there's no need for that.
It was also very human and breathtaking that you were very open about your pet peeves in the tech world, because everyone has certain pet peeves, but because there's so many niche words or sensitive topics, we usually keep that to ourselves. Yeah, so that was nice too. I'm personally curious what the inspiration for the name Wrk was. It's so creative, even the logo.
Thank you. Kudos to my director of marketing, Kelsey, who's actually on this call. Kelsey, great job as always. When we decided to develop this business, one of our key aspirations was to have a business that could be transformational and that could be recognizable. And so we wanted a word that was memorable. Really what we're trying to do here, Caddy, is we're trying to reinvent how people work, both people in themselves as well as people in their jobs. And so the brand is actually the mission. We're taking the O out of work and just really reinventing it completely and trying to make it simpler to understand, simpler to use. We're trying to change the conversation around the value chain alignment. I spoke earlier about how I don't think that people should be compensated on time, but rather on deliverable. And the reality is, if you're a great copywriter or content generator or a developer, why should it be that just because you live in San Francisco, you're going to be making 200 grand a year, but if you're living in, Quebec City, you might only make 90 grand. Location, especially post-COVID, has changed the conversation completely. So if we can evolve our models overall, every single company in the world, to compensate you on the quality of your results versus how many hours you're giving me, I think that that's a worthwhile problem to try and tackle.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a question from our audience here. Sure. And it's, how does your company relate to other automation companies like Automation Anywhere? I might say this wrong, but UPath, Blue Prism.
Yeah, those are great questions. So those companies that you're referring to a couple of them are what we call RPA that I had referenced earlier in my presentation. And then the other one, Automation Anywhere, is more of a business digitization company. So what these guys do is they'll come in and create digital versions of your department. So they'll come and say, okay, I need a form to be filled every time that there's a client that needs to be onboarded, and then it needs approval, and then it needs to be routed for this department for creation. So they'll create the flow of the information across them, but they're not going to automate the actual delivery of work. They're just automating what part goes to which department so that it can get done. Other parts of those companies like UiPath and Blue Prism actually will automate the delivery of that work, but you need to learn how to configure it yourself. So it's like being given the keys to a Ferrari engine and being told you figure out how to drive it yourself. So the distinction between us and them is we come pre-configured out of the box with units of work that do exactly what they say they do. Whereas with them, you have to instruct the machine on what exactly needs to be done, how it needs to be done, all the edge cases, all the exceptions. Not to mention that every single one of those companies that you mentioned is a minimum of $100,000 to $150,000 a year to just get started.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
And we're just coming up to the 5-minute mark now. I personally have so many questions about operating a tech company and startup during COVID times, but if we had to leave all the audience today with, one piece of advice for scaling a startup in this remote working environment, what would that be?
Automate. It would be, I'm being cheeky, but it is true. In today's day and age, all the solutions are around you. And I'm not just promoting Wrk here. There's a lot of other solutions out there. There's, companies that allow you to generate leads online. There's others that allow you to monitor your information and your data in your systems. We personally use HubSpot as our CRM. There's an incredible amount of automation applets that you can use in there so that anytime a ticket is created, it does this or it does that. So because you're now living in a world where you're not going to be in an office setting, where you don't hear this team complaining about this or that team complaining about that, and Slack is as impersonal as it gets, or whatever tool you're using for communication, you need to have systems that are in place to make you aware of what's going on, because you're going to get to a certain level in your company. We're certainly reaching that level now, where we're going to be 50 employees in the next few weeks now, where you can't keep up with everything going on all the time. So build systems and processes today before you get too big that'll allow you to keep the pulse on what's going on, and automate as much of these manual things that are happening in your company so that you're not wasting time asking a question on Slack, hey, what's going on with that client or this client? This information needs to be flowing to you all the time. So it is incumbent on you to see the solutions that exist out there today. And we're more than happy to assist, obviously, in that process.
I think that's great advice. So use technology and automation so that you can streamline your processes a bit more, so that your employees and your partners can work smarter and not harder. Did I capture that?
It's a great way to summarize it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Mo, for all the knowledge that you have imparted on us today and sharing your contact information so that if anyone has additional questions, they can reach out to you directly or through the Wrk app. So that being said, thank you again, and thank you attendees for joining the session.